Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all distinguished participants, exporters, policymakers, industry leaders, and members of the apparel trade community. Well, it's a privilege for me to join you today on this important discussion on unlocking duty-free growth opportunities for Indian textile exporters. Over past 5 years, India has kind of embarked upon one of the most ambitious journey, of engaging with developed economies with high per capita income, quite in distinct departure from the past. And the range, the depth, and the dimension of these engagements have been far deeper, far wide-ranging. The scale and scope have been humongous, and therefore you come across acronyms like SICA, SIPA, TEPA, and SETA rather than ordinary FTAs. These are actually new generation FTAs and are not merely limited to tariff negotiations or tariff reduction in goods. These new generation FTAs are all about tariff and non-tariff barriers, of course, negotiation on goods, but also more about services, about investment, about intellectual property, about e-commerce, about digital trade, about government procurement, about sustainability, about labor and environment and everything else. So these, and you know that in earlier conventional FTAs, non-tariff barriers were not actually negotiated in the way they should have been negotiated. So these modern FTAs now, these address, these standards, certifications, rule harmonization, custom procedure, technical regulations, and also talk about MRAs, mutual recognition agreements. So the objective actually is not limited to basically increasing trade volumes only, but essentially serving strategic and geopolitical goals. The focus is on resilient supply chains, critical sectors, and diversification of trade partners. Modern FTAs, are more about sophisticated monitoring, consultation, and nuanced dispute, resolution mechanisms. And there are review clauses, which allow you, constant updation to changing economic conditions. And that's the reason that you find that after a gap of a hiatus of almost a decade or so, in 2021, I think India signed SIPA with Mauritius. And then, of course, many agreements have been signed with UAE, with Australia, with EFTA countries, with UK, and then New Zealand and Oman, and now the mother of all deals like, the European Union. But taken together, these agreements have actually significantly expanded India's duty-free access to world's most important, consumer markets and reflect a strategic shift toward deeper economic integration with global market and a stronger focus on enhancing India's export competitiveness. Believe it or not, today, India's FTA partner countries now, they almost account for 75% of the global trade. Now, a legitimate question that can obviously be raised that why, it took India almost 10 years to realize that we should again be joining this FTA bandwagon and not, sun this opportunity. Many reasons, the unforeseen developments, geopolitical challenges, that led to realignment of, the global value chain and of course, and even global trade partners. So India also needed basically to look beyond traditional partners and traditional markets, to basically achieve high export growth. And with multilateralism on ventilator, I would say, on its last leg, I think all the economies were basically essentially looking for deeper bilateral engagements with countries of their interest. And there was a time, when three mega agreements were simultaneously being negotiated: TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, TTIP, and RCEP. And all these three mega agreements basically taken together were accounting a substantial part of the entire, global GDP and trade. So, of course, we did not join ourselves for obvious reasons. TPP did not, progress the way it should have. USA moved out, so now you have an improvised version of TPP, CEP, TPP, and TTIP never materialized. But besides that, there was a growing realization that shutting itself out of these mega agreements would amount to isolating itself and foregoing the competitive edge and the advantage with others. Moreover, the fact remains that FTAs are the surest and fastest way of integration to global value chain. So it was decided that India must keep an open mind and negotiate FTAs with countries that play a very dynamic role in GVC integration. And that's the reason you find that today we have hundreds of FTAs. And on the last count, I think May 2025, the FTAs in force were almost 375. But the problem is, and the caveat though, that you should not, you cannot, and you must not have FTA with every other country. The FTA you should have with either a high consumption country or with a country that can provide you raw material or inputs at a, competitive cost. The engagement in the new generation FTAs of India with high per capita income countries is precisely serving that purpose. Now, coming back to how will it help, apparel sector. The apparel sector, the developments are fairly, I would say, significant because apparel is one of the tariff-sensitive sectors in international trade. A tariff disadvantage of few percentage points can, of course, influence your sourcing decisions, and the order can go the other way. And for many years, India had a structural disadvantage in key markets like EU vis-a-vis competing countries. You had competing countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Turkey having, almost duty-free access in the European Union. Bangladesh and Cambodia, because of their LDC status, everything but arms. And then Vietnam had a FTA with the European Union, and of course Turkey had also a custom union. So while Indian products were continued to face import duties, they had duty-free access. So even when Indian manufacturers were competitive in terms of quality or compliance and reliability, they face a price rate advantage. Of course, India still has I would say, reasonable share in these markets, but then we had a distinct disadvantage. But with these agreements having been concluded and signed, I think we are looking at a 177 billion, apparel import opportunity that is we are, staring at. I mean, that of course includes Japan and Korea, which we have not been able to harness, the potential of these agreements for regions that I think we can be discussed later. And today, the trade architecture that India has been able to create, I think no major apparel exporting country has been able to do that. So but the fact is that the tariff elimination itself is not a necessary, is only a necessary condition. It's not a sufficient condition. And the glaring examples are, of course, Japan and South Korea. Because if you are offering products which are not in demand in those markets, then whatever duty concession that you get because of the agreements will lead to nothing. But there's a difference here. Now, we already have a deeper trade relation with European Union and UK. So it's only a case of exploring, trade scale expansion, not exploring the market, access of market entry. And with LDC graduation in the near future of Bangladesh and in the summer 29 of Cambodia, I think the table will turn actually in India's favor. So, and there is a major advantage that India has, we are, of course, an apparel-centric country. And because we have a presence of the entire value chain, a vertical integrated cotton supply chain from fiber to garment gives India an obvious advantage over competing country because it instantly qualifies for rules of origin criteria under all FTAs. The same, of course, we cannot say about MMF because, if we talk about if the rules of origin require fabric forward or yarn forward, well, we will not be able to meet that criteria. So the prescription is that we should first try to explore opportunities in countries which do not have, I mean, particularly cotton-centric garment, we should be able to push everywhere. And then MMF, of course, in countries which do not have yarn forward or fabric forward rule. So, but there are certain areas of concern as well. The area of concern, which requires, of course, utmost attention, is series of EU regulations, warranting sustainability like compliances. And Indian businesses, Indian manufacturers, the exporters, I think should be well advised to view these as business imperative and price differentiator rather than a cost and compliance burden. Because with CS triple D and DPP and EPR and all of that kicking off, I think it's about time that Indian producers and manufacturers should start investing in these in order to be in a state of readiness by the time EU FTA gets actually ratified and implemented. So there's a need that every possible step must be taken to ensure fullest utilization of FTAs, because our track record is not very encouraging. So there is a need to align our product offering with these markets. There's a need to augment our capacities and capabilities to manufacture products like outerwear, athleisures, and lowers, where we continue to be weak and which are perennially in high demand in developed economies. So as global regulatory frameworks evolve, I think we'll need to demonstrate not only price competitiveness, but also sustainability, transparency, responsible manufacturing practices. The lesson is clear that market access creates only the opportunity, but the competitive domestic economies determine how much of that opportunity can actually be translated into reality. So as you move forward, I think our objective should not merely be to secure duty-free access, but to convert this access into market share. The foundation, of course, has been led through a series of trade agreements. The task before us now is to strengthen competitiveness, build resilient domestic supply chains, expand our MMF capabilities, align our products with global demand patterns, and prepare ourselves for the evolving sustainability and international trade landscape. If we are able to successfully address the challenges, I think India's apparel sector is well positioned to enter a new phase of export-led growth and emerge as a preferred sourcing destination for global brands and retailers. I commend Wazir Advisors for bringing together today all industry stakeholders through this timely initiative. Such platforms, of course, play an important role in helping exporters translate the policy opportunity into tangible business outcomes and strengthen their preparedness for an increasingly competitive marketplace. So all the very best to all of you, and I would urge all of you to get into minutest possible details, to go into nuances and understand the implications of the FTA and ensure that these FTAs are utilized to the fullest. Thank you very much.